You are about to enter the world of urban legends, where fact is often stranger than fiction. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between truth and urban legend. On Urban Legends, we'll tell you 3 remarkable tales. 2 are myths, but one story, however unlikely, actually happened. Can you separate fact from fiction? Is it the story of the scuba diver who's burnt to death while still in his wetsuit, miles from the ocean and high in a tree? Could it be the story of the secret romantic night for 2 teenage lovers, their careful carnal plans crushed in shocking humiliation? Or is it the story of a soldier who breaks his neck but doesn't know it until a fateful accident over 60 years later? Take your best shot and try to guess the truth. We'll let you know if you're right at the end of the show. First up, scuba diving in a forest. Each year, California is ravaged by forest fires. An average of 7,000 fires occurs in the state annually. They destroy over 160,000 acres of forest, obliterate communities, and shatter lives. But in October 1999, the result of one particularly fierce blaze is not only a burnt-out forest, but a firefighter's worst nightmare. Investigators discover a bizarre, gruesome scene left in the fire's wake. Meet investigator Frank Willis.
We found this guy halfway up a pine tree. Not only is he halfway up a pine tree, the guy's got a full wetsuit on, snorkel, mask, flippers.
The closest body of water is more than 25 miles from the location of the body. How could the diver have possibly traveled to the forest, let alone climb to the top of the tree, in a full wetsuit? A post-mortem is conducted, and the mystery deepens.
His body had sustained severe internal injuries, which could only have come from a major impact, and it looked like he had fallen about 400 feet.
So not only has this mystery diver made it into the woods, it appears as though he's fallen onto the tree from a significant height. The autopsy reveals more clues. Matching dental records to the charred remains confirm the corpse is one Quentin Hernandez, a real estate developer from Florida. He's been reported missing by his distraught wife. Meet Quentin's widow, Luisa Hernandez.
He loved to scuba dive. It was his passion. He was a sports fanatic. I used to love to go to the beach and watch him scuba dive. I'd just sit by the shore. It was what he loved to do.
This home video shows Quentin preparing for one of his last dives. He was passionate about scuba diving, logging over 500 dives around the world. But Quentin Hernandez was about to face terrors no diver should ever have to think of.
It was October 20th. I remember it like it was yesterday. He had decided to go diving on the Pacific.
Meanwhile, miles away, several hundred acres of forest are quickly being devoured by the flames of yet another potentially deadly wildfire. A forest fire of this scale can only be fought from the air. Helicopters attached with massive water buckets are deployed, which are capable of carrying vast amounts of water. They can douse huge, fully engulfed areas that are too dangerous and inaccessible to ground crews. In this case, the water comes from the Pacific Ocean. That is the missing piece of the puzzle.
We had decided to meet up for lunch that day, so I had driven up to meet Quentin at the beach, and he saw me and waved, and I waved back.
Quentin was always keenly aware of the dangers in the sea below, but never once did he consider dangers from above. That danger arrives suddenly. A helicopter hovers overhead, dropping the large tub. It quickly fills with water. Quentin can't escape. Stunned and horrified, Luisa Hernandez helplessly watches as the helicopter flies off with her husband. Despite her calls to 911,
911 emergency
Please,
response.
I need your help. My husband's gone.
Operators are unable to contact the firefighters to alert them to their mistake. The fire is burning deep in the San Fernando Valley forest, a known communication dead zone. It would be hours before they would discover what has happened.
We realized that this poor gentleman, Quentin Hernandez, he had been picked up in this bucket and been taken up to 600 to 800 feet high, and then at some point after that, dropped.
Quentin is flown 25 miles inland and dumped along with the water onto a patch of burning forest. In his death, he helps in his own way put out the fire. The post-mortem conclusion offers Mrs. Hernandez a small measure of comfort.
Yes, he was alive, but he was unconscious. So he wasn't suffering any pain. He was out.
And although Mrs. Hernandez suffered a huge and tragic loss, she did receive a substantial settlement.
Eventually, I received $13.7 million in compensation. But that means nothing when you've lost your husband. You know, that money won't bring Quentin back.
Does this story hold water? Don't try to decide just yet. There are 2 more stories to come. While you're considering the possibility, here's a mini-myth. Mini-myth number 11. A dead ringer. Alexander Ferris, an Edinburgh medical student, turns up for anatomy class, ready to dissect a real human cadaver. He pulls back the sheet, only to see himself staring back. After his initial shock, Alexander looks into the matter. The body is in fact a twin brother he never knew he had. A double shocker, as Alexander also discovers that he was adopted. So, was this a dead ringer of truth? No, it's totally false. The legend of a friend or relative showing up as a cadaver has been circulating as a scare story for a very long time. We have 3 stories for you on Urban Legends, and your challenge is to figure out which one of them is true. We've told you the tragic tale of the scuba diver who was scooped up and dumped onto a forest fire. True or false? Or could it be the old story of the young man who tried to overcome his embarrassment to buy condoms? Stay tuned. We'll have the answer for you at the end of the show. The condom is perhaps one of the oldest methods of contraception. They've been around for centuries. Nowadays, its use is encouraged worldwide in preventing pregnancy and sexually transmitted diseases. Gone are the days when the mere mention of the word condom would provoke outrage, laughter, and embarrassment. And no longer are they kept behind the counter at the drugstore. But that's the way it was in the 60s, in the small Scottish town of Crieff. Meet Kenneth and Mary Gregory, married for over 40 years. Back in the 60s, they were just another couple of teenagers, brought together by a classic and cringeworthy tale. As Kenneth would learn, when buying contraceptives in a small town, it's easy to get caught with your pants down.
Mary was the popular girl in those days. I was lucky to get a date at all.
But Kenneth manages to get a second date with the girl of his dreams.
I don't want to sound presumptuous or that, but quite frankly, second date, and I was hoping to move things on a tad, you know? Impetuousness of youth and that.
So, the young Kenneth takes on the brave and responsible task of buying condoms. There is only one place in town he can go, the drugstore.
Now, I've always held that it's the man's responsibility, you know? A big thing for a young lad. A lot of courage to pluck up on that.
But much to the pharmacist's amusement, Kenneth is just too shy to ask outright for the unmentionables. Kenneth has to work up his courage, so he spends a few agonizing minutes picking up a few other things for his date. like breath mints and a comb. But why is Kenneth so embarrassed? Men buy condoms all the time. Meet sex expert Catherine Hood.
I don't think it was anything that was really talked about, and certainly sex outside marriage was very much frowned upon, so the thought of buying condoms would be something very, very embarrassing. It was definitely the man's responsibility to get the contraceptives. I mean, this is the pre-pill era, and women, there was nothing available for women to use.
But Kenneth eventually overcomes his fear and angst. He seizes the moment and procures the condoms.
Handed over the money, and it was done. Job done. And what's more, he says,
"And you have a good night now, laddie."
and he gives me the thumbs up.
He quickly leaves. He's over the first hurdle, feeling confident and looking forward to his date with Mary. Meanwhile, Mary is getting ready. Kenneth would be arriving any minute.
I spent the whole day pampering myself, picking out my outfit. I do recall getting my hair just right.
But Mary has an overprotective father who wants to guard her from young men with dishonorable intentions. He knows how young men's minds work, and he insists on meeting her date at the door to give him the once-over. Young Kenneth is about to arrive. He's prepared with flowers in his hand and a surprise package in his pocket.
I turned up on the doorstep, looking smart. I checked my breath. I'd taken the breath mints, you see. Rang the bell, and then at the door there's a big man. And I say, "Hello, Mr. Kennedy. Is your daughter in, please?" Hold out my hand, but no shake. So I look up properly. And it's him.
To Kenneth's horror, it's the pharmacist who sold him the contraceptives. It is Mary's father, who is now proceeding to tear into Kenneth.
"I know you, and I know what you're after. You be gone, wee man. You be gone right now."
Young Kenneth, weak in the knees and in shock, manages to escape the full wrath of Mary's fearsome father. Life taught him a cruel and embarrassing lesson that night. How could Mary's father have been the pharmacist? Impossible to be true? Or is it? While you ponder that question, kick this mini-myth around. Mini-myth number 2451. Ludicrous lightning. During a soccer game between Benishade and Basanga in the Congo in October 1998, a single bolt of lightning forks or splits as it strikes the field. All 11 Benishade soccer players are killed instantly. But the players on the opposing team escape injury. Incredible. But could this freak of nature have really happened? It's absolutely true. There is a rational explanation found in the players' shoes. The team that died wore steel studs in their shoes, while the home team had non-conductive plastic studs. So far on Urban Legends, you've seen the story of the scuba diver scooped out of the ocean and poured onto a raging forest fire. You've also seen the teenage boy who lives through the worst, most embarrassing nightmare of his young life. But now, it's time to tell you our last amazing story we call Broken Neck Bill. Which story is true? We'll tell you at the end of the show. The human body is capable of withstanding an awesome beating. Cuts will heal, bones will mend, and muscles will grow again. But there are some accidents that you are just not supposed to survive. Meet Bill Boyd, 85 years old. He's one tough cookie. But as our story shows, Bill was unaware that he'd been living on borrowed time for the last 60 years. In 2003, Bill is involved in a car crash. He suffers broken ribs, and after a week of recovery, observation, and x-rays in the hospital, he is sent home. He is told his ribs would heal in time. But soon after he's released, Bill gets a call from the hospital. He's told he suffered a much more serious injury.
They'd found from the x-rays and scans that I'd broken my neck.
To be precise, Bill has a dislocation of the C6 and C7 vertebrae in the cervical spine. In short, a very serious and potentially paralyzing injury.
According to the surgeon, I was within a millimeter of being paralyzed for life.
And this is where the story becomes astonishing. Bill's undiscovered injury has nothing to do with the car crash. The doctors date the injury back 62 years.
He asked me if I'd been in an accident a long time ago, and I said no.
Bill hadn't been in an accident, but he had been in World War II. He had served as a flight engineer in the RAF's 49th Squadron. On a bombing mission over Germany, their plane is struck by enemy fire and is soon engulfed. The crew has no choice but to bail.
You're bailing out from 7,000 or 8,000 feet. You just sail down and see the earth coming up and hit the deck with a bit of a thump and try and get under cover if you can.
Bill is deep behind enemy lines, alive, with no apparent injuries, except he has a very sore neck.
When the chute opened, I got you got a bit of a jolt, but it never crossed my mind that I'd broke my neck or anything. Although I did have neck ache, but we all get neck ache one time or another, and you just accept it. Apparently, it was more serious than I thought.
Bill has no idea of just how close he is to paralysis or even death. Meet Lawrence Friedman, osteopathic consultant.
The x-rays and scans, which have been taken many years later, still show the damage, and we can see that the damage was such that the spine had been rendered unstable at the time of the accident. Perhaps even within a week of the accident, if he'd looked down, such as when tying up his shoelaces, that could have been enough for the bones to completely dislocate and sever the spinal cord.
Germany, 18th of August, 1943. Bill Boyd is discovered by locals and handed over to enemy troops.
This elderly German and a young lad with a pistol jumped out. That was the end as far as I was concerned. I was a prisoner of war.
Bill is taken to a prison camp for interrogation. Neither he nor his captors know he has a potential fatal injury, one that could finish him off at any time. But Bill's apparent misfortune, his being captured, is a stroke of luck.
Well, the cell was basic, no furniture other than the bed. Probably 4 feet by 6 or 8, something like that. Yeah, I suppose I did 2 weeks lying flat on my back.
Locked in a cell so small that all he can do is lie down for weeks on end is ironically life-saving.
It's important, if you have a broken neck, to hold the neck still for 6 weeks whilst it heals. This is the device that we use for a patient with a broken neck.
It's called a halo vest, and when fitted, it keeps the patient's skull, spine, and chest aligned. Bill's tiny cell is his own equivalent of a halo vest. His neck has settled in one position, allowing it to heal just enough to save him. Remarkable and hard to believe, can this story be true? Find out after this tasty mini-myth. Mini-myth number 172. The steak which bit back. 49-year-old Romanian Costica Ionite was diagnosed with high cholesterol, so he gave up eating meat. After 12 years, he was told by his doctor that he could gradually start eating meat again. Delighted, Kostka bought an expensive cut of steak and cooked it. He was so excited that he could eat meat again, he took a large mouthful, swallowed, and promptly choked to death. Is this killer steak story true or false? It's totally true. In 2004, poor Kostka's carnivorous desire killed him after one bite. We've shown you 3 stories on urban legends, and it's time to find out which one is true. Did fire investigators find the body of a scuba diver in a tree? Could he have been plucked from the water by a firefighting helicopter and dumped on a forest fire? Did it happen? Well, no, it didn't. California forests really are plagued by huge fires that kill people. But Quentin Hernandez wasn't one of them. This was just an urban legend. To prevent such an accident from happening, there are grills covering the intakes of the water buckets carried by firefighting helicopters. 1 story down, 2 to go. Could it be the story of Bill's broken neck, the injury he sustained during World War II and never knew he had? Or could it be Kenneth's embarrassing story of the teenage boy meeting his worst nightmare? His girlfriend's father who has sold him condoms. No, not true. This urban legend dates from at least the 1940s, when buying condoms really was a secret and shameful mission. But as times have changed, so the legend has twisted into more embarrassing versions. Sometimes the pharmacist is a woman and her male customer meets her on a blind date. Or the girl who buys a pregnancy test kit from her boyfriend's father. But whatever version you've heard, the story's just not true. So that leaves Bill Boyd, or Broken Neck Bill. True story. He really did walk around in perfect health for over 60 years, except for a broken neck. His solitary confinement as a prisoner all those years ago during World War II really was a blessing in disguise, as Bill himself admits.
I'm very thankful to the Germans for putting me in a cell, because if they hadn't, I would have been permanently paralyzed.
So, did you stick your neck out and believe Bill's story? Well, if you didn't, you'll have another chance to handle the truth when we present 3 more stories to you on the next Urban Legends.